It was a poisonous book. Dorian read on till he could read no more. The book was frightening, full of strange ideas and dangerous dreams. Then, after his servant had reminded him several times of the lateness of the hour, he got up and put the book on the table that always stood at his bedside. It was almost 9 o'clock when he reached the club, where he found Lord Henry sitting alone in the morning room, looking very much bored. "I am so sorry, Harry," he cried, "but really it is your fault. That book you sent me so fascinated me that I forgot how the time was going." "Yes, I thought you would like it," replied Lord Henry, rising from his chair. "I didn't say I liked it, Harry. I said it fascinated me. There is a great difference." "Ah, you have discovered that," said Lord Henry, and they passed into the dining room. Dorian read this book many times. For many years he could not free himself from the influence of this book. Or perhaps he never tried to free himself from it. The hero of the book became to Dorian a type of himself, and indeed the whole book seemed to him to contain the story of his own life, written before he had lived it. Dorian thought that he was more fortunate than the novel's character. He never knew the fear of mirrors, but the hero of the book was afraid of them. Even still water reflected the terrible changings through years. It was with cruel joy that Dorian read the last chapters of the book. They told about a man who had lost everything in his late days. The wonderful beauty seemed never to leave Dorian. Even those who had heard the most terrible things against him could not believe anything when they saw him. He had always the look of one who had kept himself unspotted from the world. Men wondered how one so charming and graceful had escaped the sins of our age. Often on returning home, he went upstairs to the locked room, opened the door with the key, and stood, with a mirror, in front of the portrait. He was looking now at the evil and aging face on the canvas, and now at the young face that laughed back at him from the mirror. The very contrast pleased him. He grew more and more in love with his own beauty, more and more interested in the corruption of his own soul. He examined with a monstrous and terrible delight the hideous lines that appeared in the wrinkling forehead or around the mouth. He was wondering sometimes which were the more horrible, the signs of sin or the signs of age. He placed his white hands near the hands of the picture and smiled. He laughed at the portrait. There were moments, indeed, at night, when he thought of the ruin of his soul. But such moments were rare. That curiosity about life, which Lord Henry had showed him, grew. The more he knew, the more he wanted to know. Yet he enjoyed the life of a rich and fashionable man. Famous artists and scientists came to his parties, where the food, the music, and the conversation were the best in London. Indeed, there were many, especially among the very young men, who saw in Dorian Gray an ideal person. He studied religions of the world and art, and filled his house with beautiful things from every corner of the world. He was always busy with the search for new and delightful sensations. He became interested in perfumes. At another time he studied music, and he gave curious concerts in his house. The wild primitive music of gypsies and Indians made a great impression on him. He collected together from all parts of the world the strangest instruments. He loved to touch and try them. The fantastic character of these instruments fascinated him. He felt a curious delight in the thought that art, like nature, has her monsters, things of ugly shape and with dreadful voices. Then he took up the study of jewels. It lasted for many years. He often spent a whole day looking at his stones. he discovered wonderful stories about jewels. He said that the diamond could make a man invisible, and the agate of India made him a brilliant speaker. The cornelian stopped anger, and the amethyst drove away the fumes of wine, and the garnet sent out demons. As he studied the works of art, he got very sad, because the time ruined beautiful and wonderful things. He had escaped that. Summer followed summer, but he was unchanged. No winter spoiled his flower-like beauty. How different it was with material things. Where did they pass to? Everything that he collected in his lovely house helped him to forget his sins and to escape from the fear. Upon the walls of the lonely locked room where he had spent his early days, he had hung the terrible portrait. Its changing features showed him the real degradation of his life. For weeks he didn't go there and forgot the dreadful painted thing. Then suddenly he left his home and went down to dreadful London places and stayed there, day after day, until he was driven away. On his return he sat in front of the portrait and looked at the terrible face, smiling with secret pleasure. After a few years he could not stay far from home. He hated to be separated from the picture that was such a part of his life. Yet Dorian was also afraid that someone could come into the room. He was sure that this would tell them nothing. Even if he told them, would they believe it? Yet he was afraid. Sometimes during his fashionable parties, he suddenly left his guests and went to see that the picture was still there. What if it should be stolen? The thought made him cold with horror. Surely the world would know his secret then. Perhaps the world already suspected it. Curious stories about him appeared after he had passed his 25th year. He was sometimes away from home for several days. Some people saw him fighting with sailors in bars. The others said Dorian was friendly with thieves and other criminals. Sometimes when he appeared in the society, men started whispering in corners, or turned away from him, or look at him with cold eyes, trying to discover his secret. Women turned white when he entered the room. Of course he took no notice, and many people only laughed at such stories. They still loved Dorian, his charming boyish smile, and the infinite grace of that wonderful youth seemed never to leave him.